Another day, another story. The story's name is Behind the Killer Part 1. Sometimes things seen in front are also deceiving. Looks are something and the story behind them is something else. This story is also about a police officer who shot a man with his hands but he did not fire. It is a mystery story in which the murder is committed not by the killer but by someone else. Detective Frank Miller had been on the force for over a decade, and he prided himself on being a dedicated and honest officer. However, his reputation was about to be put to the test. One rainy evening, Miller received a call about a shooting at a convenience store. When he arrived at the scene, he found a young man lying on the floor, bleeding out from a gunshot wound. The victim was rushed to the hospital, but he died on the way. Miller's investigation led him to a suspect named John, who was a known criminal in the area. John had a history of violence, and Miller had dealt with him on several occasions. When Miller arrived at John's apartment, he found him with a gun in his hand. A struggle ensued, and John was shot dead. Frank Miller arrived at John's apartment to question him about the shooting at the convenience store. John was known to Miller as a repeat offender and a violent criminal. When Miller knocked on John's door, John answered with a gun in his hand. Miller immediately drew his gun and ordered John to drop his weapon. John refused and a struggle ensued. During the struggle, Miller fired his gun and John was hit, ultimately leading to his death. However, upon further investigation, it was discovered that John was not involved in the shooting at the convenience store, and Miller had made a tragic mistake by assuming John's guilt without sufficient evidence. Miller thought he had done the right thing, but as he continued to investigate, he began to have doubts. The evidence didn't add up, and there were inconsistencies in his story. Miller began to realize that he may have been wrong about John's involvement in the shooting at the convenience store. Miller's doubts were confirmed when he found new evidence that pointed to another suspect. He had to face the fact that he had made a mistake and had killed an innocent man. Miller was devastated by his actions, and he knew he had to make things right. Detective Frank Miller made the mistake of jumping to conclusions and assuming that John was responsible for the shooting at the convenience store without gathering enough evidence to support his theory. He had a personal history with John as a known criminal in the area, which may have influenced his judgment. Miller's overconfidence and lack of thorough investigation led him to wrongfully confront and engage in a struggle with John, resulting in his death. It was only after further investigation that Miller realized his mistake and the true culprit was identified. Miller turned himself into the authorities and confessed to his mistake. He was stripped of his badge and faced criminal charges. Miller knew he deserved to be punished for what he had done, but he also hoped that his actions would help him to make amends. Miller's wife repeatedly said in court that her husband is innocent, and in the pressure of duty and the rush to find the killer, if he had not shot at the killer would have killed him too. But the court said Miller should also try to make a timely decision about his options. So it is not worth the police job. Since her children are young, he is sentenced to 5 years. After which he will be sent to another office. It is not worth the police. The police do not doubt his bravery and hard work, but he is no longer worthy of this department. In the end, Miller's honesty and integrity helped to bring the real killer to justice. Although he had made a terrible mistake, Miller's willingness to admit his fault and do the right thing ultimately helped to right the wrongs that he had caused. During the meeting in the jail, Their wife Anna asked how they could make such a mistake. So Miller said, "I didn't understand anything, like my wits and guns were being used by someone else. In no time at all, John was dead, and I stood watching in shock." Anna said that means there was another killer behind the killer who will have to be found now. As a devoted wife, Anna now sets out to rescue her husband and investigate this mysterious murder to find the real killer. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more stories.